Got it. Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live Q&A, immigration Q&A session. Tonight, we're joined by recent graduates and international students from across Canada and, of course, outside of Canada. My name is Han, and I'll be moderating your session tonight. A little bit about Devant. On the next I want to say that Devant is in French. What it means is to be in front of. And so we believe that our services and support will bring you in front of your rest of your journey to stay, work, and succeed in Canada. So Devant is an organization specifically tailored to cater to international students like yourselves. And we are here to provide assistance to individuals like yourselves. Next slide, housekeeping items to go over with you. So if you'd like to have and write some questions for our panel, please make sure you write it in the Q&A section. At the very bottom, there's a Q&A section because the chat function won't be monitored, but this is where you'll be able to ask your questions and we'll answer them at the end of the talk. Also, I want to let you know that if you go to the last part of the slide, which is devant.ca/all events, that's where we will host future workshops. So please look there and share with your family and friends, okay? So again, my name is Han, and I'll be moderating your session today. I want to introduce you to Elizabeth. Elizabeth Long is a leading immigration lawyer. She's an active advocate of immigration and refugee rights in Canada and frequently presents and advises on immigration issues to universities, to members of parliament, to the media, for example. She holds a Doctor Law degree from University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors in psychology from Memorial University. And she holds a Master's of Law degree from Osgoode Hall at York University. She has been certified by the Law Society of Ontario and is a specialist in citizenship and immigration law, which is a prestigious list in which only 65 lawyers in Canada belong. So welcome, Elizabeth, to our session.
Well, thank you so much, Han. It's always nice to be here. We have a lot to go through today. So today, what our session is going to be is we are going to look at alternative ways to get permanent residence other than express entry. As many of you guys may have seen, the points for express entry have been really, really high recently, especially, probably around the 500s or so. And many international students may not be able to get selected through express entry. So today we're going to look at some alternatives to express entry and what you might be able to do. Now, before we get into that topic, I always want to give you a little bit of a refresher every time we have these talks on the important things about what you need to know about your student status and how to make sure that your temporary status is maintained and how to apply for your work permit as well. So let's first talk about extending your status. Very important to know is that if your status is going to expire, if you apply to extend your status properly means that you have submitted the application on. If you're submitting an application online, you submitted it online, you press that button, you shows that you have submitted it, you've paid the right fees, and you've submitted the right forms. Once all these three things are there, you've submitted your application properly, that means then you should be on implied status, or sometimes it's called maintained status. That means you continue on the status that you had before you submitted the application. For example, if you extend your study permit, you continue on, you can continue to study and work based on the first study permit until you get a decision made in your application. And hopefully at that time, it'll be positive and you have a study permit at that time. Now, what if you forget to submit it on time, or maybe you submitted something wrong in the application and the application was denied. You do have a second chance. It's called restoration of status. And most of the time, the rule is that you have 90 days to submit a restoration of status. Now, when you submit the restoration of status, you don't have status until you get a decision made in your application. So if you didn't apply to extend your study permit before your study permit ended, you can submit a restoration within 90 days of when your status ends. But until you get a decision on your restoration, you cannot study. You cannot work based on your study permit. Okay. So first thing you want to do, go and circle that calendar, or if you have, everybody has your cell phone, make sure you have so many reminders on there as to when your study permit expires, and make sure you are going to file an extension, or we'll talk about filing your work permit before then. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is actively pursuing studies. So irrespective of when your study permit expires, if you do not actively pursue studies, you will lose your status after 90 days. Okay. Now, so what is actively pursue studies? It means that you're enrolled as a full-time student, you're going to classes, you're studying, etc. Now, if you are, if you're on scheduled breaks, those are calendar breaks that are on the academic calendar, that's fine, okay? And also, if you get special permission from the school to take off a semester, it's called authorized leave. And it's one semester under 150 days. That is also okay. And that is still counted as actively pursuing your studies. But you have to have special permission from the school to do so. It's called authorized leave. Okay, let's talk about working while you are studying. You can work without another work permit based on your study permit, but only if you are a full-time student, okay? If you are a part-time student, or if you're not studying other than, having on a scheduled break, you cannot work at all. You cannot work on authorized leave as well, okay? You cannot work because when you're on authorized leave, you're not enrolled as a full-time student. Once you've completed your studies, once you get the first indication from the school that you have completed your studies, that at that point, IRCC says, well, you're no longer a student. And that point, you also have to stop working. There is an exception, and that's when, if you have finished your program and then you've already been accepted to a second program, and there's only one semester in between your two programs, less than 150 days. If that is the case, then you can work that one semester in between your programs. All right, let's talk about the post-grad work permit. Now, the post-grad work permit is very much a golden ticket, and it could be the key towards you getting permanent residence, because it does allow you to work for any employer. But you have to understand that you normally only get one post-grad work permit in your lifetime. So if you, for example, graduate from one program, you get a post-grad work permit, and then you don't get the work experience that you need for permanent residence, you can't go back to school, graduate, and get another post-grad work permit. Okay, you only get one kick at the can. And so sometimes the first question that you should ask yourself is not, how do I apply for a post-grad work permit? Is, should I apply for a post-grad work permit? For example, if you only have a one-year program, you only get a one-year work permit at the end. That may or may not be enough for you to get the work experience you need for permanent residence. If you do a one-year program and then you're going to do another one-year program afterwards, 1 + 1 = 3 years in this time. And so That might be an option for you. I'm not saying everybody needs to do that. We do need to take a look at your own particular circumstance to see whether or not you'll have enough time on your postgrad work permit for you to get your permanent residence. Also, for your permanent postgrad work permit, it's very important that you don't do distance education for more than 50%. That the online courses, the pure online courses that you do are not 50% of your program. If it is, then you may not qualify for the postgrad work permit. As well, full-time study throughout your schooling is very, very important. If you study, part-time, maybe you think, oh, well, I'm not doing so well in some of these courses, I'm going to drop it, and then afterwards, it won't show up in my transcript. Actually, that could disqualify you from getting the postgrad work permit. But for the last semester, if you're doing part-time, it's okay. But every other semester, you must have been a full-time student throughout the entire semester. Finally, when should you apply for your postgrad work permit? I tell students the deadline that you should keep in mind is before my study permit expires and within 90 days of when I first receive notice that I've completed my program. It's not when you graduate and get your diploma, degree or diploma. It's when you first get the indication from the school that you completed your program, and it's 90 days, not 180 days like the IRCC website. If you wait until it's 180 days, you will have to file a restoration of status, and you wouldn't be able to work while waiting for your work permit. If you apply within 90 days, and while your study permit is still valid, then you can start working while waiting for your work permit to be issued. Okay, so let's take a look at a quick timeline for this. Okay, let's say you're still writing your final exams. Can you work then? Yes, you're a full-time student. You can work at that time. Let's say you finished your exams. You don't have your results yet. Can you work yet? You're still a full-time student. You can work then. Now, as soon as you get the notification from the school saying, congratulations, you've completed your program. Maybe that's a transcript. Maybe that's a letter. Okay, at that point, you have completed your program. You're no longer a student, so you have to stop working at that point. You can start working again as soon as you've submitted your application for your postgrad work permit, and it's within the deadline. What's the deadline? Within 90 days of your program ending and while your study permit is still valid. Okay, and at that point, you can start working full-time. All right, now let's get to the regularly scheduled program, which is permanent residence. What do you do that's not express entry? So I'm going to go through a few programs. This first program is something that I really like to do. It's called the Startup Visa Program, and it's for entrepreneurs. Basically, if you're an entrepreneur and you can have 4 other founders together, you can all, and you establish the company in Canada, you can all apply for permanent residence. If your business, normally it has to have a certain kind of innovation, and it's accepted by a designated organization. So these organizations are on a list. They're either incubators, angel investor groups, or venture capital groups, and they have accepted your business into their Startup Visa program. Also, in order to do so, each of the founders who are applying. Now you can have, 5 founders, you can just have 1 founder, okay? But whatever it is, first of all, each founder must own at least 10% of the company, and all of the applicants for that company must own at least 50% of the company. So it can't be, for example, that you have a Canadian that owns the majority of the company and they give you 10%. Okay, everybody who is applying for the permanent residence together must own at least 50% of the company. And each founder must pass the language test of 5. And every founder, it's not a passive investment situation. Every founder must be able and willing to manage the company. Okay, so this application takes probably around 2 years or so to process. And in the meantime, you are expected to be managing the company. Applicants, if you don't already have a work permit, you can apply for a work permit to run the company. And after a year and a half or so, an officer might get to the application and then start asking for updates on the company. So it is a very much an active, management. It's not a passive investment, but it is something that entrepreneurs might be interested in applying under. There are other ways for entrepreneurs to get permanent residence as well. For example, we can apply for entrepreneur work permits. If you establish a business and you can get 200 points for arranged employment after you work there for a year, for express entry, etc. But this startup visa is an application for permanent residence from the beginning, and it's on its own. Self-employed category for artists, and I should have put athletes as well. But if you're an artist or athlete and you have had 2 years of work experience in the last 5 years in cultural activities, or for athletes, it would be athletic activities that you can support yourself as a self-employed person, or if you're hired, you're in a world-class level. And you have to show that you will make a significant contribution to the cultural life in Canada for athletes, that you are going to be able to support yourself in Canada in your sport or your art. There's a selection criteria of 35 points. Most of you will have that if you can show that you have the 2 years of work experience. In this kind of category, it's really about, have you had that experience where you were able to support yourself for 2 years? And also, will you be able to support yourself for 2 years, like in the future in Canada as well? There is the caregiver program. One of the things I like about the caregiver program is it is one of the programs where it's a relatively, it's not, the job is a lower skilled, what's called low skilled job. And it's something where a lot of people can qualify for if they have the proper work experience. So in order to qualify, you have to have 12 months of full-time work experience in Canada, where you're hired by a family to care for their children, the elderly, or disabled person in their home. Okay, so it could be you, maybe it's your spouse, okay, who, if you have a work permit, you can have a postgrad work permit, you can have an open spousal work permit, as long as you're working legally in Canada, and you take care of someone in their home for at least 12 months. Now, I do want to tell you that there's a quota for the caregiver program And there's two divisions. One is the childcare division, and the other one is to take care of the elderly or disabled person. The childcare one, the quota is filled up literally in a matter of minutes when it opens every year. It's very, very competitive. On the other hand, the one for elderly disabled persons, people who have that experience, is actually open sometimes for a few months. Okay. So, if I was going to look at which program, I would probably look at maybe taking care of someone who's elderly or disabled in their home. Remember, it has to be someone who is hired by the family to take care of them. It can't be something through in nursing agency or anything like that where you're the nursing agency's employee or you're contracted by them. You have to have a direct contract with the family. After that, it's 1 year of post-secondary education credential that you have to have. And also you need to meet the CLB benchmark of 5. All right, so those are some of the federal programs. Then we're going to go into the provincial nominee programs. Now, so here's how provincial nominee programs work. See, the federal government has jurisdiction over immigration. Immigration is federal jurisdiction. But the federal government, that's IRCC, has also made agreements with every single province and territory to allow each of them to create their own programs. And that's called the provincial nominee programs. So what happens is the province, for example, will have its own programs for selection. And then once they've selected that person, there's a provincial nomination certificate that's issued. Once you have a provincial nomination certificate, you can apply for permanent residence with the government, okay? And with the federal government. You can also apply for a work permit with the federal government. And when you apply for the permanent residence with the federal government, there's two ways. One is with express entry linked programs. You get 600 points linked and onto your express entry, you're selected for sure. And the non-express entry linked provincial nominee programs, you apply directly to the federal government. They don't make you jump through any hoops for selection criteria. They will want to take a look at your police certificates and medicals, etc. And then you will get your permanent residence at that point. So, I mean, there's so many programs around. I don't have time to look at every single province. I'm going to go through the Ontario program today, but every province has its own program. And then some of them may be similar to Ontario, some of them are quite different. So now Ontario's express entry stream, it's something where it's kind of like, that dating website Bumble? How like in that site, only the women can only contact the men and the men can't contact the women? Well, that's what I liken this system to be. So you can be in the express entry pool, but you're kind of like the men. You can't go and contact the government and say, hey, I'm interested in applying. No. You just go into the pool first. And then the government is kind of like the women. They go through the pool and they see who it is that they like. And then if they like you, they swipe right on you. And they will send you then a notification of interest. Okay? So who is the government going to swipe right on? There are 3 categories for Ontario. The first one is human capital stream. Human capital stream, most of the time they're selecting based on occupations. They have said that they like tech occupations, and there's a list of tech occupations, and they do what's called tech draws. They've also invited other kinds of occupations as well, like healthcare and other things. In order to go through this stream, you must first have a bachelor's degree. It can be from Canada, it could be outside of Canada. And then they look at your occupation, and they also take a look at your score, your overall express entry score. Normally the score is a little bit lower than the general score draws for express entry, but it is a factor that they look at as well. The second one is the French speaking one. And so if you have a CLB level of 7 in French and 6 in English at least, and you have a bachelor's degree, they might invite you to apply. Sometimes they apply occupations as well to the French speaking as well. And the third one is the skilled trades. This is one of my favorite ones. And this is one where they look at, do you have 1 year of work experience in Ontario in one of the specified trades? It's basically most of the construction trades, and also bakers as well. They like that as well. And so if you have 1 year of work experience, you're in the express entry pool, they might invite you to apply. They look at the express entry scores, but the scores are a lot lower than normal. Sometimes they're, for example, 300s or so, okay? All right, now let's look at the Ontario system for the non-express entry streams. So people who qualify for this, you still go into a pool, but the pool is quite different. The selection criteria is very different from express entry. So for example, express entry places a high emphasis on age. In the Ontario selection pool, they don't care about age at all. Age is not a factor. And there are different kinds of categories, different what they call streams that you can qualify for. But it just depends on which stream. For example, if you're studying for students, international student stream, if you studied in Ontario, Northern Ontario, that might be, you get much more points than if you're studying in Toronto, for example. Okay. The draws for Ontario, they happen several times throughout the year, but there's no real set time. Like in federal government, normally every second Wednesday or Thursday, they might have a draw. Ontario, there is no announcement ahead of time. They just kind of randomly have these announcements, these draws. The main thing is to just put yourself into the pool as early as possible so that you don't miss these draws. So there are certain streams, and we're going to go into this that are for this. It's the job offer streams and the master's and the PhD streams. All right, so first let's talk about the master's and PhD streams. This is one of the best ones for master's and PhDs because it is something where you don't have to have a job offer, okay? You just have graduated from a master's program or a PhD program in Ontario. And I think it's the only one in the entire country which does not require you to have a job offer. I think BC has one, but it's very, very limited in the kinds of study. In Ontario, it's all masters, all PhD students. You do not need a job offer. You do have to apply within 2 years of graduation. Apply does not mean that you've entered the pool. Apply means that you've been invited to apply and you've submitted your application. Like I said, no job offer. You do have to be ready to enter the labor market. So it can't be that you're doing your master's and then you're going to do you're doing your PhD and you've applied for the master's stream. They're not going to be happy with that. You do have to, once you've finished your master's, if you're going to apply for the stream, you're ready to enter into the labor market. You're looking for jobs. Doesn't mean that you have to have a job. It just means that you have to be ready. You're not studying anymore. Okay. You do have to be selected through the EOI system. So it's not everybody gets selected. Okay. They have some really odd criteria, things like It depends on like the program, engineering might have more points, whereas arts is not as many points. Where you study gives you points. Things like that. Okay. Very different system from express entry. All right. So this is another not express entry stream. It's an employer-based stream. And this is something that we use a lot for people who have job offers in Ontario. So first of all, the employer has to qualify. If your employer is located outside of the GTA, they have to have a gross income of at least 500,000 in the last fiscal year. They have to have at least 3 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees in the location where you're going to be working at, as well, they have to have been in business for 3 years in Ontario. If they're inside GTA, gross income of at least $1 million, have at least 5 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees, and be in business for 3 years. The job offer has to be full-time and permanent. Okay. Other provinces, a lot of times the employer requirement is not as stringent. Okay. But still, most of it is employer-based. So sometimes people ask me, well, which province is the best for me to go to? It really depends. Almost all of these programs will require you to have a job offer. The only one that doesn't, like I said, is the Ontario Master's or PhD stream. Now, once you have that basic employer requirement and the job offer, then we can take a look at which stream. So if you're an international student and if you graduated from a Canadian program, doesn't have to be Ontario, Canadian program that's from a public university or college. If it's a 2-year program, you can apply. Or if you have a 1-year program, it has to be what Ontario deems as a postgraduate program. So what that means is a postgraduate, how they define it right now, is a program that only accepts a degree as a prerequisite. They can't ask for a diploma or a degree, or a degree, or a work experience. It has to be only a degree. Okay. Now the government is looking to change that. They have said that they wanted to change it. So far, it's not in place yet. If you qualify for this, you don't have to have any work experience. And the salary can be in the low entry-level wage for the occupation. Then there is the skilled worker program, where let's say you didn't apply within 2 years of your graduation, or maybe your spouse is applying. But you do have 2 years of work experience in the occupation in the last 5 years. And that could be work experience that's in Canada. It could be work experience that you gained outside of Canada. It has to be in the same occupation. The salary needs to meet median wage, and the job offer, of course, needs to be high skilled as well. Okay. And then the last one is the in-demand stream. And the in-demand stream is something that is one of the only programs that is a low-skilled job, where low-skilled occupations can qualify. Now, the low-skilled occupations for this are on a list. It's not every low-skilled occupation that can qualify. They're on a list. A lot of manufacturing or farm workers can qualify. Construction laborers can also qualify. You have to be working for 9 months and in Ontario in that occupation. The salary needs to meet median wage. For this one, you also need to pass an English level, but it's very low. It's 4. And so, all of you guys should qualify for that. Okay. But it is one of those, you have to have the 9 months of work experience in one of those occupations. And of course, the employer also has to qualify. All right. The other, now we're coming more into regional programs. These are programs that the federal government has made agreements with regions as well. Okay, so the Atlantic Immigrant Program is a program that where the government has made an agreement with the Atlantic provinces, and if you have a job offer from a designated employer in an Atlantic province, so the employer has to apply for designation with one of the provinces, okay, and they have to be an employer that is doing business in that province, and you have a job offer. Now, it has to be at least for 1 year if it's from tier 0 to 3, or if it's a tier 4, then it has to be a permanent job. You have to have at least 1 year of qualifying work experience. Now, what is the qualifying work experience? It has to be a similar tier, and there's a whole chart of, depending on what tier is your job offer, what tier your work experience has to be. If you don't have the work experience, but you graduated from an eligible study program, and what is the eligible study program? Well, it has to be a study program of at least 2 years where you were in the community for at least 16 months, okay? You met the language benchmark, and you meet the language benchmark. And then also, if you work in Canada, you don't need to have settlement funds. Or if you don't work in Canada, then you'd have to have settlement funds. Okay, so that's the AIP. A similar program to that is the RNIP program. And this is for community-based. It's based on the city. Okay, these are smaller cities. A lot of them are in Northern Ontario. I think Manitoba has some, BC has some, Alberta has some, and essentially they're based on the community, and the community has to recommend you for this program. And it's similar to AIP, but not exactly the same. You either you have to have 1 year of qualifying work experience, or you've graduated from an eligible program in the community. Study program has to be 2 years or more, although if you're doing a master's or PhD, I don't think it's 1 year, but if you're doing a master's, you can be 1 year. You have to apply within 18 months of graduation, and you have to be a full-time student throughout the 2-year program with 18 months in the community. You have to have that job offer. Every single one of these programs, like I said, other than the master's or PhD, you have to have that job offer, okay? And it's important to be in the community. And you need to meet the language benchmarks. Most of you should have that. Again, you can either work in Canada or have the settlement funds. All right, so now we've talked a lot about these programs. Some of these programs may work for you, sometimes they might not. What should you do now, practically speaking? First thing, you have to have a plan. Today, what I'm telling you is just some general information. You just to get your wheels spinning on what's out there, but it doesn't mean that I'm recommending a particular program for you or a pathway for you. What you should do is come for a consultation where we actually then can put in a proper plan for you based on your circumstances as to what you need to do. Once you have a plan, then you need to make sure that you can get there, right? So study IELTS sometimes, or maybe you need to do another program so you can get the proper work experience, the work experience, and the work permits that you need. Make sure you stay in status and don't misrepresent. One of the main things I talk to you guys about is how to stay in status. Okay, staying in status is so essential. One of the biggest disappointments I see sometimes is when people don't do that. And, sometimes I think, oh, it's not a big deal. It is a huge deal when you're out of status. And especially if you're beyond the restoration period. So it can be so difficult to get you back into status or to apply for permanent residence. Maybe sometimes it's impossible. Whereas if you actually applied in time, even one day can make a difference. Okay, so stay in status and don't misrepresent. There is a lot of temptation in, out there for people to, hey, it's easy. I'll just submit this. Don't worry, they won't know. Okay. Immigration, first of all, is not stupid. They do know. And if you misrepresent, you say something, and the officer catches you, there's a 5-year ban from applying again. And let's say they don't catch you in the beginning, you get your permanent residence, you can get your citizenship. But will you ever be able to really be comfortable to know that they can't catch you? There's been many circumstances where immigration has caught these fraudsters who fake documents and try to, defraud the system, and they find their files and they strip people of their citizenship and permanent residence. Don't fall for that trap. Okay, do things the right way, plan and do things the right way so that you can be very confident in the fact that when you finally get your permanent residence, you finally get your citizenship, you know that it's yours and no one can take that away from you. If your application is rejected, contact a lawyer right away, not a consultant, a lawyer. Okay, hopefully you'll have hired a good lawyer from the beginning. You're doing things right from the very beginning. But sometimes, if an application is rejected, and you feel that it's unfair, federal court rules are very strict. You only have 15 days if the decision is made inside Canada to go and file a judicial review. If it's outside of Canada, it's 60 days only. And sometimes, maybe you might think, oh, I'll just call the call center and, I'll explain to them and they'll just, help me. No, the call center, first of all, has no power to reject or to approve an application. Okay, they're not officers, they're just agents, and they give wrong advice all of the time. And if you follow their advice to your detriment, that's on you. You can't blame the agent for giving you the wrong advice. So sometimes they'll say, oh, okay, why don't you just write a letter and send a web form and write a letter to immigration and write an email and send it. If you do that, it's considered a reconsideration request. You can only make one reconsider request. Otherwise, if you get a negative decision on that because you didn't really know what to submit, then you come to me and say, hey, Elizabeth, can you help me now? My hands are tied because they won't consider anything I submit because you've already had that one kick at the can. Okay. Also, there are timelines, restoration of status timelines, time when you can file the postgrad work permit, etc. So really do not waste any time doing anything but contacting a lawyer that you trust. All right, so I'm put here our firm's contact information. If you do want to come for a consultation, do let us know that you come from Devant and you've attended our webinar, and we will offer you the student discount for the consultation. It's $100 for the student discount. And yeah, let us know. Okay.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Let's dive into the questions as usual. There's a lot out there. So we're looking into the Q&A section. Thank you so much for asking your questions there. First one, Albin, I'm doing 1 year of PGDM and planning to take PGWP. After that, can I extend my postgraduate work permit after that?
Right, so that's one of the things we discussed. There has been some temporary policies this year and the previous years to allow students to extend their postgrad work permits, but those are really exceptions to the rule. You cannot count on that happening next year or the years after. So normally when we plan, we go by the current rules, which means that you cannot extend your postgrad work permit. Now, certainly, the government is talking about revamping, the student program. What that's going to look like, we don't know. We will add you guys who have signed on to this webinar to our email list. And we will email you guys, things that happen, news that happens that may affect you as well. Okay.
So Rav asks, hi, I'm a recent graduate. My apologies if this session is not related to queries regarding PR. Actually, I'm getting the opportunity to work on two full-time jobs. I know that people here do that, and there are no issues in working multiple jobs. My question is that, will there be any issue while applying for PR later with the experience of one job while I'm doing two? Because everything is visible on your social insurance number. I can elaborate further if not clear.
All right. So I think there's two kind of considerations here. One is it legal? Well, the question of it is it legal? If you're working under the hours that you're supposed to be working, it's legal, right? As an international students, there's no limitation on how many jobs you can do. The question of whether or not doing two jobs will qualify you for permanent residence, that's another matter. It depends on which category you're going to do. So, that question, really, you need to come for a consultation. We'll go over your plan.
Right, right. Next one, if I was on maintained status, but SP, sorry, I don't know,
Study
SP
permit, I think.
extension
It's study permit
got,
extension. Yeah.
study permit, got refused. When the 90-day of restoration period, when does the 90-day of
Yes.
restoration begin counting?
Yes.
Last day of studies in middle of my current semester when the SP was expired. My letter of IRC says nothing about it, just to apply for restoration.
Okay, so restoration period starts when you have lost your status. If you are on maintained status or implied status, you have status until the decision is made. You get the notice. If you apply for everything and they said that it's not returned. If they returned your application, then your status ended when your study permit ended. If they rejected your application, then your status ends when you got the refusal letter. And that's when the 90 days starts counting.
Right. Patrick asks, is there a age limit for startup visa?
No, there isn't.
Okay, great. How innovative should the product or technology for startup visa be? Like, what do investors assess before giving a letter of support for a visa? Do I need to present them in English about the product?
Well, definitely everything in English. How innovative the product has to be. This is something that we do work with a lot of business consultants about. It's very much a business application. And you do have to submit it to the incubators, to the angel investor groups. And it's not just, you have to submit a really good business plan. You have to you have to present. It's kind of like, Shark's Tank or Dragon's Den. That's basically what you have to do. So, if you do have something, come to me and we can talk about it, and then we can see if we can introduce you to some business consultants who might be able to give you some more idea and maybe help you apply to one of the designated organizations.
Well, that would be great to have a referral. Yeah. Next person asks, caregiver program, the 1-year work permit with a family should be within my postgraduate work permit, or a work permit applied for by the family?
So the 1-year work experience just has to be legal. It could be on your postgrad work permit. You can apply for a caregiver work permit as well, but it doesn't have to be. The caregiver work permit can take years sometimes to be issued. So if you have your postgrad work permit, you're lucky. You don't need that work permit. Just work on your postgrad work permit, and then you can qualify.
Right. Could you please clarify the job offer under the human capital? I think you were talking about the
Capital
points.
stream, yeah.
Yeah. So should it be full-time, not contractual?
So the human capital stream does not require you actually to have a job offer. It's through the express entry system. So the express entry system, like I said, you have to just be in the pool. and they can take a look at your work experience and etc. and see whether or not they want to invite you to apply for 600 more points.
This one is, what does median wage salary mean?
Okay, so the government has a whole survey of what each knock code, each occupation code has for salaries in different regions across Canada. And there are different columns, the low wage, the median wage, and the high wage. And so we take a look at that chart, take a look at your occupation, take a look at where your job offer is, and see what the median wage is.
Okay. It's right sort of in the middle.
Yes, what basically, yeah, the median,
Middle.
what most
Median.
average, I guess, there's a difference between median and average, but basically in the middle.
Exactly. Just like on the left, on the very right, when you count
Yeah,
towards it,
not
right
high,
in the
not
middle,
low, but median.
that's your
That's
median.
right. Yeah.
Not your average yet. Like you
Not
said,
average,
median.
median. Yeah.
What is considered a high skilled job? Is an office admin assistant a high skilled or low skilled?
Right. So we talked about that, I think, in one of our previous sessions. By the way, Han, I think all of our sessions are recorded, right?
They are recorded. Yes, we will be sending it to everyone. And yeah.
Okay. And so basically, Canada has an occupation classification system called the National Occupation Classification System, or better known as the NOC codes. And we have 5 tiers, 6 tiers. 0, 1, 2, 3 is high skilled, 4 and 5 are low skilled. So you have to take a look at the occupation and see which tier it falls under to see whether or not it's high skilled or low skilled. Administrative assistant is a high skilled position for the most part, but sometimes it's not just what you are called, but what you do. So if you are more of a receptionist than an administrative assistant, receptionist is considered to be low skilled.
So don't worry about the title. It's more of the task and the
It's more of the
responsibilities.
duties. That's right.
I gotcha.
Mhm.
Yeah, one of the questions about the recording, we will be providing everyone with a recording.
Mhm.
Next question, is the 1+1 program study program applicable for the RNIP stream?
No,
No.
it has to be a 2-year program, or if it's a master's program, it could be 1 year.
Okay. Can you mention high level about bridging programs?
So bridging work permits, they're not permanent residents, they're work permits. And so for bridging work permits, it's for certain permanent residence applications. So for example, if you apply for express entry and you get an invitation to apply and you submitted your application, you can apply. If you already have a work permit, you can apply for another work permit to allow you to work in Canada until a decision is made. Similarly, with a lot of provincial nominee programs, you can apply for work permits. The employer-based ones, though, they are going to be work permits that are employer-based. They're not the open bridging work permits. Some programs like the master's and PhD streams, those are open bridging work permits. Caregivers, also, if you've applied for your permanent residence, you can also apply for the bridging work permits. So yeah, on a high level, that's essentially what it is. It's a work permit to allow you to work in Canada while waiting for your permanent residence.
Right. I think one of the questions, because they're interested, how much is the consultation and how long is it? And how many consultation sessions do we get? And I guess the discount you said was 100.
There's $100 for a consultation, and normally it goes for half an hour. During that consultation, it's not a time when we actually, sometimes people bring me their entire application and say, okay, here, $100, go and take a look. Tell me what I need to do. No, the consultation is a time we don't look at your particular application. We tell you what applications you might qualify for. What is your plan? Maybe you don't qualify for right now, but what should you do in order to qualify for that? Once we have set out a plan, then we can talk about if you wanted to hire us to help you apply for permanent residence, to help you apply for a work permit, etc. then we'll give you our fees for that. Okay. So essentially, a lot of people, they come, sometimes they email me and they say, okay, tell me, I want to get permanent residence. Tell me how much it is. And it's kind of like you going to a restaurant and saying, okay, how much is dinner? If a person doesn't really
Depends.
know, if a
Yeah.
lawyer doesn't really know what your circumstances are, we don't give out just sort of like, okay, everybody, you apply for this program, you'll qualify. No, it depends on your own circumstances. Some of you, you know, express entry might work. Others, express entry probably doesn't work, or you need to do something else in order to get express entry to work. Maybe provincial nominee program. So once we have figured out that situation, the plan for you, and if we can carry it out, then we will give you the our fees for carrying out.
Right, right. Now, is there a best time to have a consultation? And do you think it's good to have a consultation or a lawyer at the planning stages?
Yes, absolutely. You need to have a lawyer, not a consultant, a lawyer. Uh, there's a big difference in the immigration system between hiring someone who has a law degree, who practices immigration law, and someone who doesn't have a law degree. It's kind of like asking someone to perform surgery if they've never gone to medical school. Have Make sure that the consultation is with the immigration lawyer and do it as early as possible, because immigration a lot of times is about qualifying, and to qualify you may have to do certain things. You may have to have certain kinds of work experience, so that affects what kind of work you're looking for, right? That's why Devon has these sessions so early for you guys. It's not about later on you work for 1 year and then you go and apply. What if what you're looking for doesn't really help you with getting permanent residence? A lot of people, if they haven't come to these sessions, they come to me and they've wasted their time. They've wasted their post-grad work permit. They worked for a year in a low-skilled job that will get them nowhere for immigration. So
Mhm.
it's about planning maybe the programs of study, and the work, the education, where you're going to work. All of that uh, will help you get to your goal.
As soon as possible, yeah. Now, this person was talking about Canadian work experience. So she applied for a job as a US startup and realized that they don't have any existence in Canada. So would her work in the US be considered foreign experience? And what should I note for while starting any job in order to get Canadian experience?
Right. So if you are working remotely for a company outside of Canada, that's counted as foreign work experience. So if the company, doesn't have any sort of entity in Canada, you're not employed with an entity in Canada, you're not getting a T4, for example. Uh, that's a tax document that you get from a Canadian company. Once, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a corporation or something in Canada. It could be a foreign company that has extra provincial license to practice and in Canada. But they have a CRA number. They're giving you a T4. That's Canadian work experience. Sometimes you have foreign entities that hire Canadian companies to hire you. It's called employer of record, EOR. Those could work depending on the situation. I don't love those kind of situations because technically the EOR is not necessarily your employers unless they do have significant control over your activities. But if you're just working for a foreign entity, they have nothing in Canada, then that's not Canada's Canadian experience.
Right. As usual, Elizabeth, always a lot of questions. We're unable to get through everyone, but everyone, you had Elizabeth's contact information. Feel free to reach out for that consultation. And again, the sooner, the better.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you again, Elizabeth. Have a great evening. And thank you, everyone. Have a great evening yourself.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye bye.